Hey everyone, tired of hassling friends and family for fantasy league entry fees? Try TeamStake.com. TeamStake provides fantasy sports leagues with a fully customizable payment collection and payout distribution system at no charge. They've got safe and secure transactions, and again, it's completely free to use. Try TeamStake.com. Now let's talk some football. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast with Mike Tagliere, and I'm Bobby Sylvester. We're on Twitter at BobbyFantasyPro and at Mike Tagliere NFL. Tags, I feel like this job is the only one where you can actually say Happy Monday and mean it. I mean, you were at the Hall of Fame this weekend. We get to talk football today. Life's good, buddy.
It is really good, and I was at the Hall of Fame, and it was really cool. It was a neat experience, but I wanted to give a big shout-out to Jamie. Jamie works at the Hall of Fame, actually, and I was in line, actually, waiting for an exhibit that they have there, and I had my back turned to him, but he said he heard my voice and knew exactly who it was, so he wanted to come over and say he was a fan, and then he let me go in there early into this it's like a locker room experience. He let me go in a few minutes early just to take some pictures and like look around. So Jamie, I know you're a big time listener, and we really appreciate your support, and I appreciate you the hospitality you gave us at the Hall of Fame.
That's awesome. I like that story, Tiggs. I appreciate all our listeners. Like, we keep getting all these comments and reviews on our podcast, and I read them all. Some of them are constructive and helpful, and some of them are just, praising our show. I love it all. Thank you guys for your reviews. Absolutely.
Like seriously, I actually met quite a few people this weekend. I don't know if it was just me mentioning that we'd be out there, but I met a few of the listeners this weekend. And so it was really cool meeting. If I met you, like, it was an honor meeting you guys, and thank you all for your support. We really look forward to dominating the season, and hopefully you guys continue to enjoy us. And another way that we're going to be connecting with some of you guys is where I'm actually doing a live mock draft on YouTube tomorrow. All you have to do, go to fantasypros.com/mock draft. And you can enter there to face me. I'm going to be sending out invites really soon, so make sure you get in there like as soon as possible. And then if for whatever reason you're not picked to do the mock draft against me, if you guys go obviously to our YouTube channel, it's youtube.com/fantasypros. If you go there tomorrow, Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, as long as you're there, we're going to be doing some giveaways. So seriously, you have a reason to be there, even if you're not part of it. It's going to be a live stream, so you're going to be able to talk to me as the draft's going on, regardless. So I really look forward to that. I love doing things where we can involve the listeners.
Yeah, man. So today's show, we're going to be counting down our favorite sleepers. We've each got 8 of them. Well, we've got more than that, but we're going to name some honorable mentions just so we can really talk in depth about those 16 players. And because this one is going to have such a long shelf life, this episode, I wanted to push the preseason week 2 takeaways back to the end of the show. That way it's not stale for all the people listening a week from now. We do need to cover, however, Adrian Peterson signing with Washington, Josh Gordon being back with Cleveland, and then later in the show we'll cover Golden Tate potentially losing his job, Peyton Barber actually being the starter for Tampa, and Mike Boone being the greatest football player on the planet. What do you think, Tag?
The greatest football player on the planet.
All right, so let's talk about Adrian Peterson, right? Obviously, Samaje Perine and Rob Kelly were not the answer. They had to go somewhere else, but I don't really know if Peterson's the answer either. What do you think?
I don't understand this signing. I really don't. I mean, I understand that Samaje Perine had an ankle sprain this week in the preseason, so I don't know if they just needed a body or whatever. They have Martez Carter. He's deeper on the roster, but I mean, Adrian Peterson at this point in his career, his skill set is eerily similar to Samaje Perine and Rob Kelly as 1-2 down backs. I mean, Chris Thompson's going to be the third down back. Guys, Adrian Peterson, over the last 2 years, he's averaged 3.11 yards per carry. I love Adrian Peterson as much as the next guy, but his career is at the end. I'm not certain that he makes the team, Bobby. So if you're listening and you're having your draft soon, know that if you want to draft him, understand that even if you do want to draft him, it would be like one of the last couple rounds.
And who knows if he's going to start, too. I mean, what are they going to do? Sign him and immediately put him in the starting lineup? Is Adrian Peterson ready?
Running backs can do that. I mean, you saw it happen with Arizona last year, where it's like when he signed with them, he started like a few days later, and then he actually went off. That was like his only good game of the season, where he had 2 touchdowns in his first game with the Cardinals. But, you know, the only reason that I think that someone should have, I guess, a little bit of optimism with Peterson is because if they know what they have in Rob Kelly and Samaje Perine, and then they still felt the need to go out and get Peterson, obviously that it says that they didn't feel like they had enough. I don't know if this is just a body for camp, but I doubt it. Adrian Peterson wouldn't sign for that. So it's possible that he gets, the starting job, but I just don't see it as very appealing, and I think he's going to be drafted a lot higher than I would want to take him.
I don't know why they didn't go get someone who's actually useful like Orleans Darkwa. I know he's not special or anything like Adrian Peterson used to be, but Adrian Peterson's basically Barry Sanders at this point. Like, they're done.
Yeah. I was like, wait a minute, Barry Sanders was really good.
That's not what I meant.
He retired way too early, but they actually did bring in Orleans Darkwa for a visit yesterday. So the fact that they didn't sign Orleans Darkwa, I don't know, man. I don't know. This is weird.
Who knows, man? What about Josh Gordon?
Josh Gordon, the news with him. Now he's back with the team, and some people wanted to assume that this automatically meant he was going to be starting. There's still apparently some hoops that he has to go through in terms of why he left the team and the return process. I do think that he's going to be back for week 1, so I draft him as such. Me personally, I'm putting him in that low end wide receiver 2 category. I don't know who I want to draft first, him or his teammate Jarvis Landry, who's been there the entire offseason working with Tyrod Taylor. So he's a risky pick. We know the upside, but again, he falls in that range of that like Marvin Jones territory. That's where I feel comfortable with him.
The answer is neither. You don't draft either of those guys. Tyrod's not going to throw the ball 500 times. I can't see them splitting the workload around from Gordon to Landry to Njoku to Duke Johnson. They've got the rookie as well. And Tyrod's going to throw the ball like 475 times. I can't be excited about drafting any of these guys as a top 24 wide receiver.
I don't know, man. Todd Haley coming there. Todd Haley throws the football, so I'm not willing to say that Tyrod doesn't. I think that he's going to get up around 550 tosses this year, maybe 525.
What, Tyrod?
Yeah, no, I actually do. Like watching this offense, I actually got to see them live on Friday night. I was out there at the game. So Carlos Hyde
drafting Tyrod? I mean, he's going to get 500, 600 rushing yards.
Yeah, I think Tyrod is a fantastic pick. Like if you're like one of those people that says, my league drafts, 15, 16 quarterbacks in the first 7 rounds. And by the way, that stuff happens more than most people want to admit. Right now, Bobby, ADP right now, which is the mass consensus, there are 20 quarterbacks going in the top 13 rounds. So if you're one of those that's in a league like that and you're like, Mike, I feel like I'm lost if I don't take a quarterback early, don't. Tyrod Taylor will be more than okay. And if you're like, well, he's going to lose his job to Baker Mayfield at some point, which I don't think's happening for a while.
Well, when he does get Baker Mayfield, but until then, Tyrod's going to be fine.
Yes, and Jameis Winston is going to come back in week 4. So I think you could pair the two of those with your last 2 picks and be more than okay.
Yeah, that's nice. I like that, man.
Yeah.
People say we agree a little bit too much on this show. I just think you're right, dude. Is there something wrong with that?
We definitely had disagreements earlier in the offseason, and I think that both of us just bring points that it's like when I make a point, it's like I want it to be a logical one, and I try and talk you into those things. And so if you agree with me...
And if it's not, I'll tell you, and you'll change your mind.
Exactly.
All right, so we're going to get into our top sleepers here in just a moment, but first I want to remind you all we're accepting entries for our listener league through the Sleeper app. We chose Sleeper because of how easy it is to run your league through it. Setup was a breeze. You can run redraft league, start a dynasty league, or run slow drafts easily. This is your last chance to get an entry in to participate in the listener league, and all you have to do to sign up is go to fantasybros.com/listener league. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the Sleeper app. All right, man, I'm going to let you go first, and we're counting down backwards here. So who is your number 8 sleeper? Well, first of all, let's define sleeper.
Yeah, so the way that we define sleeper for this particular show was guys being drafted outside the top 125 picks. These are guys taken outside the top 10 rounds. I actually prodded Bobby and I said, let's go deeper. But he said, basically, if we do guys that are outside the top 200, they're guys that they're not going to be picked in most leagues, or you can grab them off the waiver wire. So we brought it down for guys that maybe if you're in a casual league, these guys are going outside the top 10 rounds, sometimes the top 12. The deeper, the better for me. So there's very few players who are even in that territory. But I'm excited to talk about these guys just because these are the ones, this is essentially where you win your fantasy league.
And some of those deeper guys, I agree. I think that the deeper the league you play in, the better. However, most of our listeners play in those 10, 12-team leagues where you have 15, 16 roster spots. And so some of these players, John Kelly, he's going to go completely undrafted there. I love John Kelly. He's a great sleeper. He could be a star this year as a rookie if Todd Gurley was to go down. But with that said, I don't think it really applies to most people listening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's the thing is your league deep enough to handle players like that where it's just like they're an injury away. They're essentially a handcuff. So today, obviously the goal on today's show is we're going to try and talk about guys that can have value without even an injury taking place. Just things have to fall their way a little bit. And we believe that there's production there that will make a difference in fantasy football leagues.
Yeah. Okay, so who are some of your honorable mentions before we get to the countdown?
Yeah, some of the honorable mentions. Jordan Wilkins is in that list for me. I have a feeling he might be in your sleeper list, but he's there. Rob Kelly was there.
Me too.
Yeah, T.J. Yeldon falls into that list. John Brown, Chris Godwin, John Ross, Ryan Grant, and even Tyrod Taylor was almost in there for me. And as the last one was Hayden Hurst. Again, we've talked about a lot of these guys in the show. So if you've been tuning in for the show for a long time, you know that we've talked about a lot of these guys. So I try to change it up a little bit for the sleeper episode. But for those who are new, we want to discuss why we love some of the sleepers that we do. And I have a great list of 8 guys for you guys.
So I've got 2 guys that we've been talking about all off season. Well, Tags hasn't been talking about Keelan Cole, but I have. I'm not going to put him in my list. He'd be number 2 or number 3 on this list. But I've talked about him so much, I'm going to spare y'all. Same with Geronimo Allison. Tags, I've been talking about him for 4 months. So we're not going to do that again. He's the number 3 in Green Bay. Obvious fantasy edition. You can get it for cheap. Some of my other guys, you mentioned John Ross, and Jameis Winston. He just missed as well. I just think when he comes back, he'll be a top 10 fantasy quarterback right away, maybe top 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jameis Winston was definitely a favorite. Like, we had a few people on the show, and I think we were all in sync saying that he was going to be a top 12 fantasy quarterback. And, the suspension obviously hurts that. But, again, if you want to start off with Tyrod Taylor and go with someone like him, I think you'll be extremely happy.
That's really tempting. That is a really good idea. I mean, I'm drafting Dak Prescott everywhere because of his week 1 matchup, and I play streamers at quarterback. But if I didn't, Tyrod and Jameis Winston, that is a great match.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so why don't you start us off here? Who's your number 8?
All right, so number 8, I'm going to go with Mitch Trubisky here. When we go through ADP and we talk about certain players, right, and you look at guys like Tariq Cohen and how people are excited about him, drafting him sometimes as a top 30 running back. He's a pass catcher primarily. You have Jordan Howard going in the top 15 running backs. You have Allen Robinson as a top 24 receiver. The hype on Anthony Miller is real. You have Trey Burton as a top 10 fantasy tight end. So when you start looking at all these things, it's like this offense is obviously going to score a lot of points. Quarterbacks are obviously where it all starts and begins. So when you talk about all these options, trying to figure out who's going to get all those points, because someone is bound to disappoint when you have that many players being hyped up, Mitch Trubisky is the one who's going to be in control of all of that. And I've mentioned on the show before is that Mitch Trubisky's athleticism is extremely underrated. He ran for almost 300 yards last year. It was an abbreviated season with zero creativity in it. I would not be shocked to see him rush for 350, 400 yards and a couple touchdowns.
Oh, more than that, man. I'm going 500 plus.
That's possible. He's the type of athlete. He was the best athlete among the quarterbacks, I want to say, last year at the Combine. So Mitch Trubisky, very underrated athleticism. Obviously has the weapons. He's got the young offensive mind. There are so many parallels between him and Jared Goff last year. And Goff, I mean, he finishes the number 12 fantasy quarterback, so it wasn't like an elite season.
But he only threw 470 passes.
And he also did not run the ball because he's not mobile. Mitch Trubisky is. So I think that he is the best sleeper. If you're waiting at quarterback in drafts, I think you could take him with the final pick. Pair him with Tyrod Taylor if you want, if you feel like you're uncomfortable. But I'm telling you, Mitch Trubisky is a fantastic late round sleeper.
I'm not going to fight you too hard on this, Tags. I love Mitch Trubisky's upside. I think he could be a top 8 fantasy quarterback this year. Even though they didn't throw the ball at all last year, they've got a new offense. They've got all kinds of new weapons. He is that talented. I would rather have someone who's done it more recently, though. Alex Smith, who's going in the same range. And Alex Smith was a top 4 fantasy quarterback last year. He's going to go up from 505 passes to maybe 550. I think he could be an MVP this season. He's a sleeper to be an MVP. So I would rather have Alex Smith there. I understand your take on Trubisky. I just disagree with you, mostly because there's other guys I like more.
It's fair. It is fair. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I don't like Alex Smith, because I think Alex Smith is an awesome pick, but I also think his ADP is going to slowly move up, especially when you consider the lack of rushing attack now in the Washington offense. It's just not as good as it once was, with Darius Geis. So they're going to rely on him. And also, I have a player profile coming out on him, I want to say either tomorrow or Wednesday. It's going to be up on the website, so make sure to check that out. And it highlights why Alex Smith is extremely underrated right now.
You know what's really interesting to me? This is my number 8 guy. It's not Rex Burkhead, but I want to start out by talking about Rex Burkhead. His ADP rose from, 38 to 30 in a matter of a week when Sony Michel was going to miss maybe a week or two. Everyone's so excited about getting, this guy might actually be a starting running back. Yet they're letting Bilal Powell go. How far is he falling into drafts? He's the 58th running back off the board. 58th running back off the board. I think he's the clear-cut starter in New York. Is there even a competition with Crowell anymore, Tags?
I would not put it as a competition. I mean, I think it is just because of what they did, obviously bringing him in free agency. They felt like they needed to address the Matt Forte departure.
Sure, but in the preseason, they're telling us it is Bilal Powell.
I agree with you on that one. I've been saying all along, I think Bilal Powell is more talented. Now, granted, he's 30 years old now, so, the downturn in his career is definitely coming. Isaiah Crowell is not a 3-down back. He can catch passes, I guess, but if a team, like the Jets, who is not expected to win very many games, if they're going to be down in these games, Bilal Powell is for sure the best passing down option on that team. So to know that Bilal Powell finished as a top 30 running back last year with Matt Forte on the roster, guys, Matt Forte is better than Isaiah Crowell. I don't know how to break that down. I don't think we need to break that down on the show. So I love Bilal Powell as a late round pick. Awesome pick.
Yeah, he's a solid flex play almost every week, especially if he's starting. The year before, he was a top 20 running back. And the reason why is he finished the final 4 weeks being the starter. And he was a bell cow in those 4 weeks. Guess where he finished? Fantasy running back number 2 in those 4 weeks. I'm not saying he has that kind of upside. I'm saying he is serviceable, he's reliable, and he's starting. Yet he's being drafted as the running back 58. That's a sleeper.
I agree, and he was actually the number 7 pick on my list as well, so I have no issue with your Bilal Powell love there. Again, don't draft him thinking he's going to win you your fantasy league, but if you're a guy that wants to go wide receiver heavy in your draft and you're looking for just guys who are going to get you, they're going to have a decent floor in your flex, Bilal Powell's definitely that guy.
There's going to be a lot of people starting Nick Chubb, C.J. Anderson, Devin Funchess as their flex, Isaiah Crowell, and they're all going to be way behind you if you've got Bilal Powell.
Agreed.
All right, man. So he was your number 7. Why don't you go on to your number 6? Because I'm sure I'll steal one of your guys later, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So my number 6 is James Washington, the Steelers. James Washington, we had talked about him throughout the preseason quite a bit. Even going back before the draft, I said that he was one of my favorite wide receivers when it came to ball tracking. He landed in the perfect situation with Ben Roethlisberger. And I say that not just because it's Ben Roethlisberger, but because it's with the Steelers. While many people are disappointed by rookie wide receivers, over the course of the last few years, nobody wants to draft them anymore. And that's why you're seeing these guys fall. Washington is going to a Steelers organization that had Juju Smith-Schuster finish as a top 20 wide receiver last year in his rookie season. And that's despite missing a couple games. Then you go back a few years before that, Martavis Bryant, he missed the first few games, or 6 games, I think it was, came back and finished with 8 touchdowns over the final 10 games of the season. Rookies can make a difference in this offense because when you have Antonio Brown taking the attention away that he does, he pulls safeties. You have Juju Smith-Schuster over the middle now. He's going to walk into that Martavis Bryant role, and I think everybody saw his ball tracking skills on display this week. He scored 2 touchdowns. I had so many people adding me, but like, wow, if you haven't heard of James Washington, you haven't been listening to the Fantasy Pros podcast because Tags and Bobby have been talking this kid all off season.
I watch him play. I went back and I watched the tape on James Washington. He was someone I was high on before the NFL draft. He's only gotten significantly better. I really think he's going to have a better career in the NFL than Juju. I love Juju, but I think James Washington is that good. I'm not saying his rookie year is going to be as good as Juju. I mean, Juju's going in the top 25. And that's a good place for him. I'm not drafting James Washington anywhere near that because of the targets he's going to get. Right now, he's going as the 76th wide receiver overall, though, and he's starting in 3 wide receiver sets in a system that uses a 3rd wide receiver.
Yep. They use 3 wide receivers a lot, and they're talking about doing no huddle a lot more this season. So you might even see their play count rise. They're going to be a top 5 NFL scoring offense. And if for whatever reason, Juju or Antonio Brown were to miss any time, you have an every week starter in James Washington.
Mm-hmm. I am getting a little bit more excited about Courtland Sutton. I haven't moved him ahead of James Washington or Anthony Miller, but I'm really intrigued by Courtland Sutton. You watch him play, and I think it's only a matter of time before he steals the starting job from Emmanuel Sanders. He's just flat out better.
Well, it seems like Emmanuel Sanders, they're going to move him into the slot in order to get Courtland Sutton on the field. Apparently, with the way that Sutton's been playing throughout training camp, they can't keep him off the field. So they're moving Emmanuel Sanders into the slot when they go 3 wide. So he's going to be playing quite a bit. I mean, I would imagine it's going to be 60 to 70% of the time. And that's enough to do some damage. I know Brad Evans from Yahoo, he was on the show last week. He was talking about Courtland Sutton and how him being from Denver, he has a lot of inside sources there, and they're saying that Sutton is the real deal and he's going to get playing time. So he's one of those guys in the later rounds to keep an eye on for sure. But I just don't see 3 wide receivers being relevant from the Broncos. That's my issue there.
I think so too. Yeah, that's my issue there as well. Otherwise, I think I would move him ahead of James Washington because I think he's a more talented player. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up being the best receiver in this class. Now, granted, I love Calvin Ridley. I love DJ Moore. They're not in great situations for this year, but in terms of career, I think they're the better players. I wouldn't be surprised if Sutton ends up the best wide receiver, though.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley's a stud. He looked really good this weekend. I know we're not talking about the games, but Calvin Ridley looked really good.
Here's my number 7, and it is also a rookie wide receiver. And this one doesn't come as much down to talent as it does opportunity. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity in San Francisco's offense to get targets. Marquise Goodwin, yeah, there's a lot of hype about him right now. I don't think he's really a volume receiver. Pierre Garçon is, but he's injury prone. He's getting older. I think Dante Pettis is going to get a lot of run in the San Francisco 49ers offense. Tremendous route runner. He's going to be on the field. Jimmy G's going to get his. And that means somebody else has to. I think Dante Pettis is going to be a very useful rookie wide receiver.
It's very possible, and I've come around to that because the reason I did is because like some people were worried if Trent Taylor was going to start and Pettis wasn't going to start, but Pettis can actually play on the perimeter, which means they can move Pierre Garçon and him around and keep Marquise Goodwin on the perimeter, 80% of the time. So I do see him being a part of this offense. I think he's going to be more of like a spot starter than anything, where it's like you kind of have to pick your spots, and it's going to be really difficult to do it, which is why I probably have him below guys like Calvin Ridley, because I think you're going to be able to pick out Ridley's spots, and you're going to be able to play him at certain times. But I do think at the end of the year, people will say Pettis had more of an impact on the 49ers offense than they thought. I just don't know if it's going to be very predictable for fantasy football.
I think that's fair, man. Tags, I watched so much football this weekend. I know you were at the Hall of Fame, and you're going to catch up on all those games. I watched the Jags holding Kirk Cousins to 12 yards. Only on NFL Game Pass can I get every out-of-market preseason game live. The top rookies, comeback players, new players on new teams. It all happens in the preseason and is going to give you a huge leg up to actually see players playing football. Can't wait to see Mike Boone and Rock Thomas again torch the Seahawks this Friday. With NFL Game Pass, I can watch that electric Vikings backfield, and if I miss the game, I can replay it after it's aired. Whoever you want to watch this preseason, you'll need NFL Game Pass to do so if you're out of market. Will Baker Mayfield win the starting quarterback job? How will Jordy fit in with the Raiders? Can Kirk Cousins take the Vikings to the next level? Make sure to watch all the action this preseason with NFL Game Pass. Best of all, you can kick off the 2018 NFL season with a 7-day free trial of NFL Game Pass. Sign up now at NFL.com/fantasypros. Game on. All right, man, we are not even yet, so I'm just going to jump in and give my number 6, and then we'll do our number 5s together. My number 6 is someone you already mentioned. It's Chris Godwin. He's starting for the Bucs. He passed up to Deshaun Jackson. And we mentioned Jameis Winston earlier, right? This is a guy in his 11 healthy starts. He would have thrown for 4,900 yards if you prorate that out of 16 games. That would have led the league by a ton. Chris Godwin starting in that offense. He was unbelievably efficient last year. As a rookie, I think he steps into much bigger targets. Yeah, Mike Evans is still there, so his ceiling is limited. O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate are there, but Chris Godwin's going to be reliable and useful every single week.
Godwin was really good down the stretch last year, and if you were in the fantasy playoffs, you weren't looking for someone like Chris Godwin, but I'll tell you this, over the final 4 weeks of the season, 26 targets, 16 receptions for 295 yards and a touchdown. He was the number 14 wide receiver during that stretch. So it's really hard to let him fall off your radar. Now, I think Mike Evans has a big bounce back here. I don't think that he's nearly as bad as some people are making him out to be. I don't think he's elite by any means, but I think that Mike Evans is still going to be somewhat of a target hog. And as for Godwin, they're splitting reps between him, Deshaun Jackson, and Adam Humphries this offseason, trying to determine who's going to play where. Again, this is another team that runs a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, so you're going to see Deshaun Jackson and him on the field quite a bit. But the question is, does he start in 2 wide receiver sets? Because if he does in fact win that job over Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin is going to move up draft boards, and he should be right around that wide receiver 50 range, which is obviously inside the top 125 picks. So he's definitely moving up draft boards if he gets that starting job.
Yeah, right now his ADP, that's average draft position, is 69th overall. He's going behind guys like Martavis Bryant, Deshaun Jackson, Paul Richardson, Tyler Lockett. I'll take him over all those guys. Not even close.
Yeah, no, for sure. And he's just a really talented guy. He's somebody that reminded me kind of like a Pierre Garçon, but obviously a young version of him with a young quarterback. So I like Godwin and have no issue with that one for you.
All right, what's your next one, Tegs?
All right, so my next one is Michael Gallup, wide receiver for the Cowboys. Now, Michael Gallup should be in the starting lineup right now. Unfortunately, he's not, and that's why he's not being drafted as high as you would expect. We're oddly enough, like Allen Hurns is still not being targeted very highly in drafts. He's going as like the wide receiver 47, so he's a deal as well. I'm not saying Allen Hurns can't be drafted. I'm just saying that Michael Gallup is the most talented wide receiver on the Cowboys roster, and I think if you watch him in the preseason action, you probably can pick up on that. They're just making him earn his stripes, and they don't want to start him over Terrence Williams for whatever reason right now, the guy that they refuse to give up on, even though he's held their offense back. I don't get it. but Michael Gallup is going to be starting sooner rather than later, and it's possible he does week 1. So if you have your draft this week or this weekend and Michael Gallup hasn't been announced as a starter yet, you're going to get him with one of your final picks. And once he's announced as a starter, people are going to be like, oh man, you got to steal with him. I wish I would have taken him sooner. I knew he'd eventually get the job. But you're going to be proactive in this, right? You're going to grab Gallup because he's going to get into the starting lineup.
A few years ago, remember Odell Beckham? A lot of people drafted him. He was out 6 weeks. A bunch of people ended up dropping him. And then somebody picked him up. They're like, oh, I guess, I'll take a flyer on this kid, Odell Beckham, and see what happens. And right away, he was a star, just a superstar. There's a lot of receivers in this class. Tags, is there any receiver that could be a superstar this season?
Oh, there is, and he's on my list. I haven't gotten to him yet, but there is one that's on my list.
I have no idea who you're going to say. I'm really interested. Oh, I know who you're going to say, and I disagree with you, but we'll see. All right, here's my number 5. It is O.J. Howard. I don't really want to wait at tight end. I'm trying to get Trey Burton or Kyle Rudolph as my very last resort. Maybe Jordan Reed. If I have to drop, though, I'll take O.J. Howard just because it's a big-time flyer. I don't know what they're going to do with Cameron Brate. I just mentioned Chris Godwin. They've got Mike Evans. They're going to pass the ball a ton. They threw the ball over 600 times last year, over 4,000 yards. It's going to happen again this season. It's just who Tampa Bay is. And O.J. Howard last year only had 39 targets. With those 39 targets, Tags, 432 yards, 6 touchdowns. He was just 30 fantasy points behind Evan Ingram, despite 76 fewer targets.
Wow.
I mean, he could be a star. If they start throwing in the ball, he could be a top 5 tight end. I don't know if it's going to happen. I'll take a shot, though. I'll buy a lottery ticket.
Back on June 6th, I just looked it up because I had to while you were talking. I was like, I know I had tweeted out something about O.J. Howard. So the tweet was this: despite missing 2 games and seeing more than 4 targets just twice all season, O.J. Howard finishes the tight end 17 in a year where Jameis Winston's touchdown rate was much lower than it should have been. There's absolutely a ceiling with O.J. Howard. And here's another thing I tweeted out actually in season last year that I said, when Jameis Winston plays the majority of snaps, there was just one game in 2017 where the tight ends combined for less than 14 PPR points.
Oh, great stat.
Yeah, so if for whatever reason that Cameron Brate is hurt or if he misses time or whatever, O.J. Howard is going to be a tight end 1 every single week. But again, he's the one that they drafted with Cameron Brate on the roster. They took him really high in the NFL draft. He's uber talented. And honestly, Cameron Brate was probably the better blocker, so they might use O.J. Howard more of a receiving role. I love that pick, and I may have overlooked him with my tight ends.
Yeah, I don't know, man, because you're just getting Trey Burton everywhere, aren't you?
I am. I really am. I'm getting Trey Burton or Delaney Walker, or guys, or Jordan Reed. I actually got him this weekend. So those are the guys that I'm ending up with on a lot of my teams.
I wish we could talk about Trey Burton more often.
People would get mad at me, and they'd call me a Bears homer.
No, I know they would. People who have listened to the show for months are like, please don't. You guys already talked about him so much. But yep. I am just... I think that he has a huge floor and a huge ceiling, so I'm pretty pumped about Trey Burton. Tags, why don't you do your number 4 now? Don't take my guy.
All right, it is a guy that I didn't expect to be moving up as high as he has recently, but it's Mike Williams of the Chargers. Mike Williams was drafted as a top 10 pick last year. They did that with Tyrell Williams in the roster. They did that with Travis Benjamin. They did it with Hunter Henry. They did it with everybody on their roster minus Hunter Henry, Antonio Gates, okay? They did this knowing that he was going to be the future at wide receiver. He was the future in the red zone. And knowing that Hunter Henry is out for the year, or, conflicting reports on that he might return this season.
There's no chance he returns. I want it as bad as anybody. I'm still so sad about that. I wake up every day and I eat a pizza because I'm just so sad that I need to soothe myself. Okay, but Hunter Henry, there's no chance he comes back.
No, he's not coming back. And what's funny is the reason that you can get Mike Williams for cheaper than you should is because a question I received on Twitter today. It came through and it said, "Are you concerned that Mike Williams didn't play much with the starters in the second preseason game?" No, I'm not. I'm really not at all. He was going to be out there for some more reps, and he got them, and he scored a touchdown he went straight Randy Moss. He went over. We were all out for a few drinks when that game was going on, and we were watching, and I was like, Mike Williams just had it was a grown man's touchdown. Went over the defender, snagged it, and was just like, give me the ball.
Yes.
Mike Williams is going to start. And I'm telling you right now, if you draft Tyrell Williams over him, you're going to regret it.
Definitely, man. I've been getting Mike Williams. I think it's 6 straight leagues that I've got Mike Williams. I have him as my number 2 sleeper today. I read this quote, okay? Chargers coach Anthony Lynn told me he was walking behind one of his players this week and thought the player was a defensive lineman. Then he realized it was Mike Williams. He said Mike Williams reminds him of Terrell Owens and should make matchup problems.
Wow.
Yes, wow. You compare a guy to one of the best receivers of all time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
How late is he going, too? Like, Mike Williams right now, number 52 wide receiver off the board. Oh, man. I love this. This is a huge steal.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I said, Mike Williams, don't be shocked, and I'm not going to be shocked when Mike Williams scores 8 touchdowns this year, at least.
Yeah, I could see that as well. I mean, Keenan Allen is not a touchdown guy. He's a volume guy. He's not going to get the ball in the red zone, though. Mike Williams, without Hunter Henry, without Antonio Gates, oh, yeah.
Yep, Phillip Rivers is going to throw 30 touchdowns. That just happens like every year, pretty much. So they're going to go somewhere, and Mike Williams is a young cat. Obviously didn't get to practice much with the team last year with his back issue, but he's been out there. He hasn't missed any time this offseason, so he had a full offseason. And again, he's like the only red zone threat they have right now.
I was going to call your bluff on him throwing 30 touchdowns every year because it's like, how many guys threw 30 touchdowns last year? Like 2, 3? Mm-hmm. Look, here's what he just done. 34, 28, 30, 27, 26, 32, 31, 29, 33, 28. Yeah, he's the lock, man. He's a lock to be right around that.
Yep.
Whew. I did not realize that. Wow. Why are we not drafting Phillip Rivers?
He has no rushing totals, so he's essentially like...
Yeah, and the 20 interceptions.
He doesn't have 20 interceptions.
He's got 15 to 18 every year.
Oh, is it that bad?
Oh, it's not that bad. Last year he had 10. The year before 21, he had 18, 15, 20. He used to be a turnover machine.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know if last year's... I mean...
He's like Blake Bortles with confidence.
Part of that was attributed to him obviously playing with really bad defenses. Like the Chargers had a bad defense for a long time. They had a bad offensive line. And last year was one of the first times he was actually blocked, and they had a good defense. So if things continue to trend in a good direction for him, maybe that's what we get.
Does he have MVP upside?
I would say so. I would say that the Chargers without Phillip Rivers as a quarterback...
I mean, Matt Ryan did. Phillip Rivers is better than Matt Ryan, in my opinion.
Oh, he is. He for sure is a better quarterback than Matt Ryan.
Yeah. I wish Phillip Rivers wouldn't have ended up in San Diego / now Los Angeles, because I would have loved to see him. Like, imagine him on the Patriots. He has so much talent. I would have loved to see him in a better situation.
I think Phillip Rivers is arguably better than Ben Roethlisberger.
Arguably?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's close.
People would argue with me about that because Ben Roethlisberger has multiple Super Bowls.
Oh, okay. Yeah, people would definitely, most people would argue, but I'm surprised to hear you say that it's even a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I respect Roethlisberger, what his career has been, but I think that...
Jalen Ramsey doesn't. You already said?
Oh, yeah. He said he basically put down every quarterback, though.
That was awesome. Yeah. He was right about a lot of them, though, man. I mean, he was right. Tyrod Taylor's underrated. Matt Ryan is, he was just propped up by Shanahan. All kinds of... He was on the money. I loved that. I want to see all these guys be candid like that.
I mean, if he had called out his own quarterback, like he would have if Blake Bortles were on another team, what would he have said about Blake Bortles?
Allen Robinson called him out last year when he was on the team.
Exactly.
All right, man, let's get to your number 3 now.
All right.
Wait, I haven't done my number 4. You're trying to skip me.
You just passed it off.
Just passed it. Here's my number 4, and again, this is somebody that we've talked about quite a bit. Not as much as Keelan Cole and Geronimo Allison, but I've been growing more and more fond of the situation in Baltimore for John Brown. Michael Crabtree just has not looked very impressive. I think he's kind of fallen off a cliff. And I think John Brown, as long as he stays healthy, and that's been the issue with him, right? He can't stay healthy. If he stays healthy, he's been extraordinarily efficient, and he could be the number 1 in an offense to throw the ball 600 times every single season. I know Joe Flacco's not good, but if John Brown gets 130 targets, John Brown is going to eat.
Yeah, I don't think John Brown's going to get 130 targets, but I think this is a good one because he was on my almost list. He almost made the cut. The reason I say that is because all we've heard this offseason out of the Ravens camp is John Brown, John Brown, John Brown. We haven't heard a single word about Michael Crabtree, Willie Snead, the rookie wide receivers. We haven't heard anything. John Brown is the star there. And it kind of goes back to the upside that he showed back with Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer wasn't the greatest deep ball passer, but he made it work with John Brown. John Brown's talent has never gone away, guys. Whenever John Brown is on the field, he produces. The health was always a concern. And again, he's been practicing. He's been fine. And the reports are that him and Joe Flacco have connected. By the way, Joe Flacco has every single reason to chuck the ball down the field to John Brown this year, because if they feel like Joe Flacco is not very good, they're going to go to Lamar Jackson, right? But he is supposedly, reinvigorated, and he is ready to show them why they paid him that big contract to begin with. John Brown's obviously a big part of that, so I like this one.
Don't forget, Joe Flacco finished the season as a top 5 QB over the last 5 weeks.
Oh,
I'm not saying that he's going to be any good. I'm just screwing with you, man. Because I know that you think Joe Flacco's the worst. I don't know. Do you think Joe Flacco's the worst or Blake Bortles is the worst?
I don't think he's the worst. I mean, I would rather have Joe Flacco than Blake Bortles, if I'm being honest.
Not in fantasy, obviously, because Bortles runs the ball. But in real life, yeah, I'd take Flacco.
No. I'm talking about as an actual real-life quarterback. He's better than Bortles. Yeah. But yeah, he's not elite, and that's what people were saying.
Like, if Flacco was on the Jags last year, they win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to say.
Well, yeah, especially considering Flacco played pretty well. He's played pretty well in the playoffs throughout his career. He hasn't lost them games, so...
I've had 2 or 3 people on Twitter say to me, and I'm sure you saw these as well, Tags, like, you guys just need to give up on John Brown or players like this. Like, why do you keep holding on to them? And it feels like 100 people have said it since 2 or 3 people do, because, you hold on to those comments. But here's the thing. John Brown was being drafted like 110 last year. Right now he's being drafted, 180? He's the same player, same injury risk, better situation, probably going to get more targets. And he's being drafted 70 picks later. Why? The process hasn't changed. Why would I change my mind on John Brown?
Yeah, and John Brown just wasn't healthy last year. Like, the thing is with the equity you put into John Brown last year, as you mentioned, he was right around the 110th pick. That's not like a whole lot of equity that you're putting into that. Like, if I miss on Saquon Barkley this year, come at me with that one, because that's one where I'm telling you to spend the equity and that he's going to give you return. But yeah, I'm not going to...
You lose nothing if you draft John Brown and he gets hurt.
Exactly.
Plus, it's like, I mean, how many times have you been burned by somebody? Or you see somebody get burned by someone and they're like, never again, I'm never drafting John Brown again. I'm never drafting Andrew Luck again. How many times has that burned them?
Yeah, don't do that.
I don't want to be that guy. If my process tells me that John Brown is a good player at this value, I'm going to draft him. Sorry.
Yep, that's basically how I feel. And the thing is like, you get down to these last ones we're talking about, and you're gonna have to choose, because these are guys that are going in the final rounds, and you're like, I can't get everyone, so I have to choose which ones. Understand that John Brown, he does come with risk because he has been not healthy the last few years. But as we've said, with all word out of Baltimore, which is all we really have to go off, is that he looks phenomenal and that he hasn't been missing practice. And if he's on the field, he's always performed. So again, I mean, man, it's tough, because like I think it was 2015, John Brown was one of just 3 wide receivers who finished a top 24 wide receiver with less than 100 targets. Like, the talent is absolutely there.
Yep, definitely. All right, man, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is James White. We talked about him on the podcast, in the one that we went through and talked about the potential next Alvin Kamara. And I'm not going to sit here and say that James White is going to be Alvin Kamara, because he's not. He's a different type of player, but he's excellent in the passing game, okay? And I want you to think about this for a second. Looking at Deion Lewis last year, Deion Lewis was undrafted in fantasy leagues last year. Why was he undrafted? Well, because he was looked at as a third down back. James White kind of had that role. And, I mean, they'd mix him in on first and second down, but he would have never been like, he's not a breakout star. He's not going to be a top 12 running back. Well, if you look over the final, 8 weeks of the season, Deion Lewis was like a top 5 running back, and you played him every single week. So opportunity is key there, right? You have Rex Burkhead dealing with a knee issue that they say is going to bother him for a while. You have Sony Michel, who we love, but he costs you a lot more than James White. And it's not to say that he has a knee issue that he had to have drained just about 10 days ago. So James White, fun fact, they've played 6 games. The Patriots have 6 games in the playoffs the last 2 years. James White has 8 touchdowns in those 6 games. James White has stepped up when it's mattered most. In those games, he averaged over 4.2 yards per carry. He's obviously a great receiver. Losing Brandon Cooks, cutting Jordan Matthews, having Eric Decker drop things in practice, Julian Edelman being suspended for the first 4 games. So many things going on here. On top of that, not having an offensive line. They just lost Isaiah Wynn, their first-round pick for the year. Like, their offensive line has lost pieces. They're going to need someone to do the dump-offs, and James White has been perfect for that role. I love him. And by the way, in this analyst draft that I did this weekend, he went in the 9th round. So it kind of goes to show you where people view him in the industry. James White is going far later than that in regular public leagues.
I remember the very first time we ever talked, Tags, you told me this stat about James White being the most efficient fantasy running back in the history of fantasy football. That was my first impression of you, and I was like, man, that is a great stat. And this is who James White is. He delivers. But here's my issue. I was starting to get excited about James White. I was telling people to draft him. I've changed my mind since then. And that's, that happens. I've changed my mind a fair amount. Things change. In my opinion on James White changed because I just keep going back to Sony Michel. Yeah, Dion Lewis did that last year when Sony Michel wasn't there. Sony Michel's there now. Unless Sony Michel is out for an extended period of time, James White's ceiling is capped at what? RB 30, RB 25?
I mean, in a PPR league, I think it's right around the RB 25, 30 range. And it's going to be a little bit hit or miss than you would like. But I'm telling you, this team is just different. And I think that it's got to be built different, right? Like, they don't have the receiving options that they have had in the years past. I think there's a lack of stability on the roster. I think the offensive line is a lot worse than it has been. Again, they lost 2 starting tackles this offseason, and then they lost their first-round pick in Isaiah Wynn. So they're going to need to figure this out. And James White has always been trusted on passing downs. He's just like one of those guys that's they gave him a long extension last year. So again, he shows up on the biggest stage. Don't be shocked if James White turns into like an every week player.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think he's safe, but when I'm looking for a sleeper, I don't really want someone who's safe. Like Marquise Lee's a great value. He's safe. He's safe week to week. But I want somebody who could be a home run. Someone like Alvin Kamara, like Kareem Hunt. And the guys I've mentioned don't have that kind of upside. But, they have more upside than, yeah, he'll be a good flex. You know what I mean?
But you wouldn't have said that Dion Lewis would have had a top 5 ceiling before last season.
Yeah, but Sony Michel, again.
Well, right. But that's the thing is, like, I'm just saying that if Sony Michel, if he's dealing with this knee thing, he already has been dealing with an injury, and so same with Rex Burkhead.
You're right.
If one or the other are out of the lineup, it's not even just Sony Michel. If one of the others out of the lineup, James White's going to have a very, very big role.
You're right, but then I would also say Jeremy Hill. The Patriots seem to really like Jeremy Hill at this point too, and he's going to get goal line touches.
But he can't catch passes. He sucks.
Yeah, he does. But I mean, I think he's going to have a role because he's good at that one role.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get it why you're excited about James White. Lots of people are. The hype's kind of worn off for me. Really quickly, actually.
Yeah, when he goes in the 8th or 9th round, you're basically taking a fantasy starter, which I don't want to have. I want like this seriously room for so much growth. In public leagues right now, you can get him like 12th round or later. And if you can get him there, it's kind of like a no-brainer, and you'll see what you have.
Yeah. All right, here's my number 3. You mentioned him earlier. It is Jordan Wilkins. Guys, I think he's going to start for the Colts. I think the Colts are going to score 420 to 450 points this year. Marlon Mack is still there. Nyheim Hines is going to catch some balls out of the backfield. But, I mean, do you remember when Michael Beller came on earlier in the year? Actually, it was earlier in the month, and he said, watching Jordan Wilkins reminds him of Matt Forte. And when I watched the tape on Wilkins, I just can't get that out of my mind. It seems right. This is a very good rookie running back, and he's coming into the perfect situation where there's no clear-cut RB1 in that backfield, and they're going to score a ton of points. He can be a 3-down back on this team.
I think that you forgot which Michael said that, because this Mike said that. I was actually in my draft process.
Sorry, man.
No, it's okay. I'm just messing with you. But in reality, Michael might have said the same thing. But I said he's like a lesser version of Matt Forte. He doesn't look like phenomenal like when you watch his tape, but he looks really good at pretty much everything. And the Colts coaches have talked about it, saying that they don't know how, like, because he's not like a metrics freak. He's not going to jump off the page with his athleticism, but you just watch him and he just gets stuff done. And knowing that Marlon Mack had shoulder surgery this offseason, knowing that Nyheim Hines is having difficulty picking up the playbook, knowing that Marlon Mack also suffered a hamstring injury, knowing that Robert Turbin is suspended for the first 4 weeks, Jordan Wilkins makes for a great late round pick, because you'll know exactly what you have in week 1, because with all these injuries and with all these things happening around him, if he doesn't have the job in week 1, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think he's a great pick for someone like if you wanted to draft Mark Ingram and then grab someone like Wilkins who could start the first couple weeks, or someone like James White who could start those first couple weeks, especially with Julian Edelman out. But I think that's a good pairing.
Yeah, I think it's Peyton Barber if you want to do that. I think Jordan Wilkins, if he gets this job in week 1, is going to just hold on to it. I think he's good enough. All right, who is your number 2? Mine's already taken. It was Mike Williams.
All right. Mine is Anthony Miller of the Bears, and he's the reason that Allen Robinson is moving down my draft board. When you hear all these positive reports out of camp, and like every single beat reporter that goes to Chicago comes away saying Anthony Miller, the kid is just, man, he's going to pop. And it reminds me of Odell Beckham Jr. in a way. And I'm not going to sit here and say that he's going to have that effect in fantasy leagues, but going to a team that like has a new identity. Allen Robinson coming back from the ACL, it's very possible that he may not start the year strong. He didn't get as much time with Mitch Trubisky that he probably would have liked to. Whereas Anthony Miller was in rookie minicamp. He was in the minicamp when Trubisky was there catching passes while, Allen Robinson wasn't. And so after hearing all this stuff, I went to camp myself and walked away. All I could talk about was Anthony Miller. The kid is the game is not too big for him. He had a few good catches in the game against Denver yesterday. People are getting excited about him, and I think there's good reason for it. Mitch Trubisky with how he's operated as a quarterback the last, if you go back to North Carolina, he loved Ryan Switzer out of the slot. You go to last year, Kendall Wright became a legitimate fantasy option down the stretch as they developed some chemistry. And with the way they're moving Miller all around, they're moving on the perimeter, they're putting him in the slot. They're going to use him in a unique way, and I think his skill set is going to allow him. I think the sky's the limit for this kid.
Tags, when I found out we were doing a sleeper show, I went on NFL Game Pass, and I watched Anthony Miller because I knew you were going to talk about him, and I wanted to argue with you. And I can't. I can't argue with you, man. I think he's the second most polished rookie wide receiver in this great rookie wide receiver draft class. And I really do mean great. I mean, there's 6 or 7, 8 guys who I think will be at least wide receiver 2s for a long time in this league. And Anthony Miller's right there near the top. Calvin Ridley's the most polished, but he's also got someone named Julio Jones on his team. Yeah. Allen Robinson is nowhere close to Julio Jones. I don't care what you say. I think Anthony Miller, it wouldn't surprise me if he outscored Allen Robinson this year.
I don't think that would be a hot take. I think it's possible. Now,
and it's a big time hot take. Everyone's going to be like, dude, you are crazy.
Would I bet on it? No, I wouldn't bet on it. But would it like keep me up at night and be like, how did I not predict this? No, it wouldn't. And I think it's crazy. So like looking at it,
public would say 1-2% chance of it happening. I would say 15-20%.
Bobby, seriously. So here's some players that are being drafted ahead of Anthony Miller right now. Deshaun Jackson, who might not have a starting job. Tyler Lockett, who's been a major disappointment his time in the NFL. Martavis Bryant, who hasn't even run with the first team offense.
In Oakland.
Why? I don't get it. Michael Gallup, who's not guaranteed a starting spot. Like, I like Gallup as a sleeper, but Anthony Miller is a starting wide receiver.
Yeah. Yep. You said you've been moving Allen Robinson down. I've been moving Trey Burton down, man. I had Trey Burton up as my number 6 tight end. Now I've got him at number 9.
Did you watch him this game?
Yeah, he looked awesome. But the thing is, Anthony Miller's going to get the targets.
Well, it's weird, and that's the thing. I think Tariq Cohen is the one who's going to disappoint fantasy owners.
Yeah.
In terms of people expecting a breakout from him. Because when you look at Trey Burton, the way that they're going to use him, when you look at Anthony Miller, the skill set that he has and how they're going to use him primarily out of the slot, I think Tariq Cohen is the one who's going to disappoint fantasy owners who are expecting like a breakout, because he's not someone you want to carry the ball much on first and second down, and if he's not getting the receptions, I mean, he's going to pop off at times for sure, but it could be like a Corey Clement type a player instead of like a Darren Sproles.
So those of you who are listening for maybe just this one show, or, you're just around for fantasy football draft season, Tags and I do this all year round, and it's not every single day. It's like 1 a week, 2 a week, 3 a week during draft season or whatever. But we did an early sleepers episode in, what was it, March, April? And Tags and I both love Terry Cohen. And we have come so far down on him now because they went and they added Trey Burton. They drafted Anthony Miller. They added Allen Robinson. If not for him, yeah, I think Cohen could have been awesome. I guess he still could be okay if injuries happen. But, things change. You have to make adjustments.
Even when they signed Allen Robinson, I was like, oh, he's walking into 120 targets. Easy. It's going to happen. And then it's like they signed Trey Burton. It's like, okay, that's going to take a little upside away from him. That's okay. Cohen. Then they signed Taylor Gabriel, and I'm like, okay, he's a role player, but still, obviously, they signed him for a decent amount of money. And then they go and trade up to draft Anthony Miller, and I'm like, okay, what the heck is going on here? So things changed a lot, and that's the thing is like we do adapt to this stuff. There was a lot that changed. So by the time in the offseason at this point, honestly, your opinion shouldn't change much on a player unless they're moving up or down the depth chart, and it's legitimately like standing out. Like someone like Ronald Jones and Rashad Penny, we have to move those guys down because it looks like they're not going to start the year.
Yep, definitely. Okay, here's my number 1, then Tags will go to you for your number 1. Tags thinks that we have the same number 1. Mine's Ryan Grant. That's not who you have, is it?
It is not. Ryan Grant was on the just missed list.
Okay, well, I've got Ryan Grant. He's the clear-cut number 2 wide receiver. I mean, what are they going to do? Put Chester Rogers in the starting lineup? No, it's Ryan Grant. I know that Andrew Luck likes Aaron Luck. I almost called him that because they're, the 2 best quarterbacks in football right now. If Andrew Luck is healthy, right? I mean, Andrew Luck has that upside, right? Last full season he was healthy, 356 passing yards. Tom Brady's only done that once in his career. Andrew Luck was that good the last time he was healthy. I know we don't know if he's healthy. He's going as the quarterback 10, but he's got that kind of upside. And if Ryan Grant's his number 2, and T.Y. Hilton, he's mediocre, right? That's who Ryan Grant is. Ryan Grant's mediocre. Ryan Grant could be amazing with Andrew Luck. I could see him being a top 20 wide receiver this year, and he's going like wide receiver 70, man.
Yeah, no, he's like, I have him on so many best ball rosters. It was a no-brainer. Like, he was going undrafted so many. I got him in literally the 17th or 18th round. Every now and then now I see him creeping up when Deion Kane went down with his year-ending injury. But yeah, Ryan Grant's a fantastic pick.
Whoops, he's going number 85, by the way, after Antonio Callaway, Cole Beasley, Eric Decker. Jordan Matthews isn't even on a team. I don't understand. Like, we were hyping up Ryan Grant and Geronimo Allison right next to each other. Number 2 wide receiver for a great quarterback. Number 3 wide receiver for a great quarterback. Geronimo Allison's ADP shot through the roof. Ryan Grant is still sitting there at 85, people.
Yeah, Ryan Grant is still underrated. I like the fact that he's on a one-year deal. And again, they're learning a new offense. So T.Y. Hilton, just because he was the target guy in the years past, it's a brand new offense. Frank Reich coming in, it's different. We don't know if Hilton's going to be using the slot like he was, in past regimes. We don't know. But we're going to find all that stuff out. But yeah, Ryan Grant is clearly the number 2 wide receiver there. And, again, I think that's a fine last pick. I've talked about him quite a bit, so I didn't want to bring him up on this episode, but he was on the just miss list.
Who in the world is your number 1? You're acting like it should be obvious. I don't know who you're going to talk about.
You just talked about him. You just said they were being right next to each other. Geronimo Allison.
Oh, well, yeah. I'm sorry. I already mentioned I wasn't going to bring him up just because I mentioned him every show for the past 5 years.
Oh, well, that's the thing is, like, we've been talking about him all off season. So, like, this is the one show where it's like, we know we're going to have some people listening in that haven't listened all off season. But Geronimo Allison was fantasy football's best kept secret this offseason. And there is no such thing as secrets anymore in fantasy football, but Geronimo Allison somehow slipped through the cracks. It reminds me of last year, when the Packers, people forgot that they drafted 2 wide receivers and they're like, oh, what's going to happen with those guys? Nothing happened with them. Actually, one got cut. He was then signed back to the practice squad. Now D'Angelo Yancey is back on the active roster. It's ugly. Malachi Dupree, I think he was the other one they drafted. He turned into nothing. He's now somewhere else.
Plus, Rodgers hates the rookies. He's already talked about it a lot.
Oh, God. I've watched interviews with Aaron Rodgers talking up Geronimo Allison. By the way, in even the most recent one, he talks about it. He's like, what these young kids need to do is learn consistency. They need to learn how to practice because they don't get it. He's like, go out there and watch 17. Go out there and watch 18. Go out there and watch 81. So what he did, he ran through the top 3 wide receivers in the offense: Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, and Geronimo Allison. And the reason that I'm moving Allison slowly up more and more, guys, I went back and looked through the history of players who've suffered foot injuries, okay? And they can come back from them and play well. But the key is to have the surgery or whatever they have done the year prior. So if it happened at the end of the 2017 season and they had surgery in December, they're going to be fine for the following year. But when they have it in the off season, almost always these players tend to have a bad year. So Randall Cobb.
Oh, all my Randall Cobb shares are wasted? Is that what you're saying?
In saying it doesn't look good, he would be considered an outlier because players that have off-season surgery on their foot or ankle over the last, I think I went back 4 years and I looked at players, like seriously, it was really all bad. It was nothing was good. And I watched some of the Packers this week, and Randall Cobb, there was a target that he had gotten in the end zone and he kind of ran away from, and it looked like he was limping a little bit. They've pulled him out of practice at times. I think this is a real issue for Randall Cobb, and I think Geronimo Allison is going to be asked to play a much bigger role than people think. Tied to Aaron Rodgers, the sky is the limit. I mean, we saw James Jones score 14 touchdowns.
Yeah, and James Jones was not really very good.
Right. Geronimo Allison, Aaron Rodgers continues to say, this kid comes to practice. He's in the right spot. He's where he's supposed to be. He understands the offense. He doesn't drop passes. Like, Aaron Rodgers likes Geronimo Allison. And if you recall, when everybody was dogging Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers in interviews said, you guys just don't give up on him. He's going to be a star in the league. And now people are drafting Devontae Adams as a top 6 wide receiver at times. So listen to Aaron Rodgers when he tells you that.
Man, I'm looking at the difference between James Jones, the year he scored 14 touchdowns, and then 2 years later when he went to Oakland. He got an extra 15 targets in Oakland that year, and he had over 100 fewer yards. He had 8 fewer touchdowns. I mean, it's just, we're making the same argument here for Geronimo Allison and Ryan Grant. It's the quarterbacks that make these guys. They're serviceable, and they're in the right spot, in the right offense. They're going to get the touches. And if Randall Cobb is out, yeah, Geronimo Allison would be my number 1 as well. No doubt about it.
And that's the best part is like he legitimately is going undrafted in most leagues.
Yep, not in my leagues. I'm getting him at the end. In every single one, I'm getting Ryan Grant and Geronimo Allison, and I feel great about it. In fact, I'm waiting on wide receivers even more so just because I know I can get these guys later. And same with John Ross, who we mentioned earlier, Chris Godwin, Keelan Cole, one of my favorite guys, Mike Williams. There are just John Brown. There's so many of these guys that are stupid cheap, and you know what you're going to get out of them. It's targets, talent, in a good offense. And so it makes sense to grab 2-3 of these guys and just let them be your depth pieces instead of someone boring like Nelson Aguilar, who we already saw his ceiling last year, and it was okay.
Yeah, I mean, if Alshon Jeffrey's out, Nelson Aguilar's ceiling might go a little bit higher. But yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, and that's why guys like Tyler Lockett don't really do it for me. I would rather draft some guys that have some massive upside, like the guys we talked about. I would rather take Allison. Again, Russell Wilson is elite, but at the same time, Tyler Lockett hasn't been able to do anything. And by game speed data that's out there, Tyler Lockett is really slow. Like, people consider him a fast wide receiver. Like, in terms of game speed and how he plays, he's played extremely slow. And I actually published an article this morning. If you guys want to win a bar bet, I was told this was a great stat to win a bet. Who was the fastest player in the NFL last year? In terms of the ball when the ball is in their hands, the fastest player in the NFL last year was Leonard Fournette. That's right. He was faster than Tyreek Hill with his pads on last year. Nope. NFL's next-gen stats, they have chips in the player's shoulder pads, so it tracks their speed. Leonard Fournette had the 2 highest speeds last year in terms of when carrying the ball.
No way. Are you serious? He's like 500 pounds of pure muscle.
That's what I'm saying. I love Leonard Fournette. Like, seriously, I still think he's underappreciated in terms of what he's going to be in the NFL. But yeah, Tyreek Hill, I want to say was 5th on the list. Travis Benjamin, I think, topped him. Leonard Fournette did twice. And there was, I can't remember the other ones right now. But yeah, check out the article on the site. It was neat. I kind of went through NFL's next-gen stats and found how they relate to fantasy football.
Now, obviously, that police officer, I don't know if you all saw the YouTube video of a police officer chasing a guy down and tackling him. If he was in the NFL, he would have been number 1. Tags, you saw that video, right, man?
Oh yeah, I definitely saw it. And it was, by the way, whatever that guy did, like, so in order to catch up to those guys was impressive. But the most impressive thing about that video, if you haven't seen it, was his takedown, his tackle. Like, when you're chasing someone, it's hard to get like a clean hit on them. No. He leaped like Superman.
The guy might have died. He got tackled so hard.
It looked like a quarterback standing still getting sacked.
Yeah, after he ran 100 yards and uphill. Guys, I retweeted it at Bobby Fantasy Pro. If you just want to go through my timeline, or I don't know if that's what it's called on Twitter, but you can go on through and you can see the video for yourself. You are going to want to see it. I've watched it like 8 times because it is just so impressive.
Yep. Yeah, no, it was pretty nuts. But Bobby, before, like, obviously the number one, we went through the sleepers, but I promised some listeners that we would talk about the whole Ronald Jones, Peyton Barber thing. I want you to give me your take first. I want to know how you're approaching the situation and what your takeaways are right now.
Okay, so let me just be upfront with you right now. I was telling people Ronald Jones is a top 18, 19, 20 running back about 6 weeks ago. Maybe more recently than that. Right now I've got Ronald Jones as my number 36 running back. I think this is over, man. He has just been terrible. Do you disagree?
I'm not going to say that he hasn't been bad. So here's my take on it.
He has been terrible. You have to say those words. Ronald Jones has been terrible. He does not look like a starting running back in the NFL. Peyton Barber doesn't either, but you know what? He's a lot better than Ronald Jones.
Okay. So here's my take on this. And Peyton Barber is going to start the season for the Bucs. I've conceded that. I've said, before I said it was time. We're running out of time.
You laughed at me when I said that it might be possible, but it's happening. It's really happening.
But we're running out of time for Ronald Jones, so I'm anticipating him not starting. However, people are overreacting to this news. It's kind of like the whole Rashad Penny, Chris Carson thing, except Chris Carson is actually really talented, whereas Peyton Barber is kind of like, okay. Like, he's a guy. He is the definition of just a guy. And Peyton Barber, that's fine. He's undrafted. I know he's got all that stuff. Okay, the Bucs went out there and drafted Ronald Jones where they did in the second round. Okay, so they're going to give him every reason to shine. If you want to sit here and argue with me that Ronald Jones is not a more talented player than Peyton Barber, I'll argue with you all day. Okay, but however, I am conceding that Peyton Barber will start. However, Peyton Barber, I think it's going to be more of a 50-50 timeshare than people are thinking. Like, it might be like Peyton Barber's getting 12 carries, Ronald Jones is getting 8 or 9. They're mixing up the targets. It seems like Charles Sims might be hurt now. We don't know how to approach that. but I think it's going to be somewhat of a share. And in the end, when you're playing on the same team, okay, and when talent will win over the course of a season, especially at running back. So I believe Ronald Jones eventually takes that job. However, I'm not drafting him as a top 24 running back like I was before. I have moved him down into that Marlon Mack, Jamal Williams range. I think that's fair because these are guys who might be in somewhat of a timeshare, but we know the upside.
I'm still drafting Penny because Penny is a stud. But I've been watching Ronald Jones. I didn't like Ronald Jones' tape. I didn't have him as a top 8 rookie running back before the draft. And then he got drafted by the Bucs, and I was like, well, it looks like he's going to be a workhorse. Guess I got to draft him. And I'm watching his tape in the preseason. He's even worse than I thought. He is even worse. He is even worse than I thought. I liked Rock Thomas about as much as I liked him.
Oh, I look forward to him proving you wrong.
Okay, we'll see. You're wrong.
So my take on this is that obviously you drop him down draft boards, but don't think that he's going to be absolutely useless in fantasy. Like that's my take on him is that you can draft him as like a flex player. Like if you start 2 flex, like I do in most leagues, I'm going to start him in the flex because I think he's going to get 8 to 10, 8 to 12 touches per game to start the year. And I think it's going to slowly increase to more. He's an explosive player, guys. I'm not willing to give up on him after a 2-game sample size.
Please do that against me. I will use Charles Sims right up against you, and I will beat you every week.
Oh my God.
Charles Sims is going to get touches, man. He's going to get 6-7 touches.
Bobby and I are, should we make a bet on this?
On Ronald Jones being a horrible football player?
No, you're going to start Charles Sims against me, and I'm going to start Ronald Jones.
I mean, if you want to start Ronald Jones, sure, I'll pick up Charles Sims against you in week 1. That's fine with me. That's fine.
We're going to make it happen.
Okay, yeah, we will bet something. I didn't promise any of our listeners, but I did promise myself that we were going to cover Golden Tate potentially losing his job. A bunch of people have been asking me about this, like, oh no, what do I do? Kenny Golladay is actually starting. This isn't real, is it, Dags?
It's not real news. I mean, so the technicality is real, yes, that Kenny Galladay's out there in 2 wide receiver sets, and the reality of it is that the Lions play more 3 wide receiver sets than like any other team in the league, outside the Rams, I think. So it's real news, and it's also fake news. It doesn't really matter because Golden Tate wasn't like a perimeter player in years past either, so it doesn't matter. Legitimately, it does not affect how I feel about Golden Tate at all. We knew Kenny Golladay was going to take the number 3 wide receiver role, and that's what he is in line for targets. That's how we care about it, right? So, yeah, that I'm not too worried about that one. I did want to touch on Patrick Mahomes, and
hold on, I want to stick with Golden Tate for just a second. When I saw that, man, I was so panicked. I got all these shares of Golden Tate because he's super safe every year, 90 receptions, right? But I'm looking at the snap count here. There's only like 10 wide receivers who play more than 90% of the snaps. There's like 20 who play more than 80% of the snaps. So I'm not really super worried about this. Yeah, he's not going to be on the field every single play. So what? He never is. Chris Conley was on the field for 89% of the plays last year. Do you want him? Well, in Dynasty, maybe you might get him for like a 30th player on your roster, but because he's talented.
That's funny.
Yeah, Golden Tate, 76% last year.
Well, let's just piggyback on that. You said Chiefs. You said Chris Conley, so it just ties me into my Patrick Mahomes thing. A lot of people have brought up Tyreek Hill. It was like legitimately, guys, thank you for all that, by the way. Everybody who hit me up on Twitter when Tyreek Hill scored that long touchdown from Patrick Mahomes, you were right. I don't know how else to say it. Tyreek Hill is very fast. I'm not going to say he isn't. Patrick Mahomes' arm is also very, very strong. However, Patrick Mahomes it looks more and more like Jay Cutler every time I see him. By the way, while he did have that chuck that Tyreek Hill just ran under, he outran 3 guys. There were legitimately 3 guys chasing him on that play. It was kind of ridiculous. So Tyreek Hill, I'm slowly changing, man. Like the kid, I know he's impressive, but in terms of target share, if he overcomes that, that's going to be the difficult part.
That's the thing, the target share. I can't get over it.
Impressive. But Patrick Mahomes, I'm telling you guys, it's worrisome. He was picked off once in the stat sheet. He should have been picked off twice in that game. And he only played, obviously, a half. He threw one. It was a bad interception. The interception he threw was a bad one. Like, it was just, he was staring down the receiver. And then in the red zone, Bleedy Breh Wilson, a guy who legitimately we target in DFS when a wide receiver is against him, he dropped an interception in the end zone against Mahomes. So he should have been picked off twice. So his game, there were some positives, but I think you're going to have Jay Cutler syndrome with him, where it's going to be really up and down. In another note, Bobby, I'm Did you get to see the Lions game at all? And if not, then that's okay.
I did not see the Lions game. I saw highlights, of course, but
I'm going to give you what you need to know. The Lions started Ameer Abdullah. Okay? I'm not kidding.
What?
No, I was legitimately shocked.
Oh, I'm so excited.
No, when I got back, I started going through NFL Game Pass, actually, and watching all these games in condensed form, because I could watch games in like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Actually, 10 minutes if I wanted to watch just the starters. Ameer Abdullah was playing with the starters. Now, granted, he fumbled.
I think I'm going to cry. I am so excited.
No, he fumbled, and then they pulled him for a second, and then they put him back in the game. Here's my take on this, though. Do I think Ameer Abdullah is going to start for the Lions? I do not. I think this may have been I think they're trying to showcase him. I've been saying all along that I think Ameer Abdullah should be traded with the players they have on the roster. They just don't all mix together. Ameer Abdullah looked pretty solid outside of that fumble, but that's something you should definitely pay attention to because he was legitimately out there with Matthew Stafford and the starters.
I'm so pumped, man. You know where I want to see him go, actually? Obviously, I'd love to see him go to my team because I love Ameer Abdullah and I'm a Jags fan. Washington, they already signed Adrian Peterson, so it's not going to happen. I'm getting over this. I want to see him go to Houston. I think Foreman's going to end up on the PUP list. They need a backup running back, and I would love to see Abdullah get some touches in there with Lamar Miller because I don't think Miller can be a workhorse. I think that'd be a really good fit.
I don't mind that one at all. The offensive line is really bad, though, and Abdullah is somewhat of a patient runner, and that doesn't play well with an offensive line like that. I know people might be like, what? But the Bears, I've said it, the reason that I like Jordan Howard so much this year is because, and I am worried about him as a receiver, yes.
They've got no one else who can run between the tackles?
They have nobody. Legitimately, Benny Cunningham and Terrell, God, I'm forgetting his last name right now, but he's like an undrafted kid that's like 5'9", 5'10". He's not a 3-down workhorse. Mizell, I think Terrell Mizell. They have no one behind him. That's why I like Jordan Howard. But Tariq Cohen will never, ever be that guy. So I'm telling you, I think that it's interdivision, so I don't know if it's ever going to happen. But it would be interesting for sure.
Hey, by the way, I know this is kind of going all over the place, but I had to share this. I didn't want to interrupt you. Did you know Odell Beckham, when he was playing last year for the Giants, only played 77% of the snaps, and Julio Jones only played 74%? He missed a quarter of every game, Julio Jones?
Well, Julio, I believe it. Like, 'cause he'll pull himself out of the game at times, and yes, he's definitely not out there for every single play. Julio, if like he runs like a deep route, they'll sometimes just have him on the sideline just because. As for Beckham, I don't know if that was affected by him getting knocked out of that one game where it's just like I think it was before halftime, so that might have changed those numbers a little bit. But yeah, the superstars come off the field sometimes, guys. Like they don't play 100% of the snaps.
Guy who did play the most, DeAndre Hopkins, 98%. Whew. That's a lot of football, man.
Yeah.
All right. Stat of the day. Let's finish this show out with the stat of the day. And this one comes from Fantasy Pros featured writer Ryan Malosi. He tracked DST, that's Defense Special Teams, ADP, so their average draft position and their performances over the last 5 years. Listen to this. This is why drafting a defense doesn't make any sense. Over that time frame of the 25 defenses drafted, top 5, only 6 of those 25 returned top 5 value at the position. To put that into perspective, another 6 finished outside the top 20 at the position. So 12 of those 25 finished outside the top 12 of the position. And of the top 5 teams, we've seen more finish dead last than we've seen finish first. In those 5 years, the number 1 DST was not drafted in the top 5 once.
Wow. That's a pretty interesting stat. I knew it was bad. Like someone actually asked me, they're like, Mike, is there a boom bust and everything in between for defenses? And I was like, no, I didn't do one because defenses, honestly, year over year, everything changes. Players, schemes, they lose players in free agency. People don't follow it as closely as offenses just because it doesn't impact their fantasy football. But seriously, defenses change so much year over year, and a lot is relied on touchdowns, things you cannot depend. If the ball bounces their way, they're going to finish higher in the final standings than they would have if that ball, they didn't get that touchdown, So there's so much variance in defenses. That's why we tell you guys just to never, ever. And I'd even argue that the Jaguars are going to have regression too. They're going to be an elite defense. I would still say they're the number 1 defense. But who's to say that they don't get as many defensive touchdowns this year? They just might be an elite defense in terms of stopping other teams from scoring. They just might not, get as many return touchdowns on those interceptions or fumbles.
I agree, man. I mean, is there any defense you would draft before the last round?
Well, the Jags I would. I think the Jags, if you told me that...
How high? Because you've got to take them in the top 10 rounds if you want.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, me, it comes down to... I would take the Jags in I think I would do it in like the 13th or 14th round.
Okay. Wow, you'd take them that early.
I would think about it. Depending on who was on the board and who was on my team and all that stuff, there's a lot to it.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I keep doing all these draft wizards because I'm preparing for my league that actually uses DST, because most of my leagues don't even use DST because it's such a crapshoot. And I keep finding myself like, maybe I should take the Jags because they were that good. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were even better than last year, because they've got all these young kids and they had like 4 touchdowns called back. But I just can't do it. I can't draft any defense at all. I'm not drafting a defense.
I completely get that. I mean, there's a few defenses, and I think we're going to have a show coming up for those who have wanted to hear about defenses. We're going to do a segment for you guys to talk about them. Like, there's a few defenses that I feel like are definitely draftable, and I think might be a little undervalued. But a lot of the times people are just starting to look for those Jaguars defense, and there's not a Jags this year, guys. Like,
there won't be for another 10, 15 years. That doesn't happen.
Correct. It was quite ridiculous what they did last year. But everything kind of fell that way. But we'll talk about some defenses in an upcoming show.
Yeah. Every single person we talked to last year, by the way, knew that was going to happen. All the experts knew the Jags were going to break out.
Nope. I was the only one, Bobby.
That's not true at all, dude. I drafted the Jags in every league, including the league I was in with you.
It's because I told you to.
You were mad at me. You cursed at me.
Just roll with it.
And then you cheated in the playoffs with Todd Gurley scoring 5 touchdowns. He put in a cheat code somehow. If Todd Gurley ruined your league, it was Tag's fault. He caused that.
This was a fun show, man.
All right, that's all for today's show. Tag's lots of fun, buddy.
Yeah, for sure.
And thanks to the sponsors of today's show, teamstake.com, where you can get fully customizable payment, collection, and payout distribution systems at no charge. And also NFL Game Pass. Get a 7-day free trial of NFL Game Pass. Sign up now at NFL.com/fantasypros. And also don't forget to sign up for the Fantasy Pros Listener League. Go to fantasypros.com/listener league to submit your entry. For Mike Tagliere, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening and enjoy your football.
I just wanted you to watch me dissolve.